Right, well, good afternoon or good morning to all of our fantastic new viewers.
Or good evening.
Hey, good evening as well. And welcome to the Jamanda Podcast.
Yay, Jamanda. Oh, long time in the coming, but here it is.
Here it is. How long have we been talking about doing this podcast for? It feels like ages, but we're finally here.
Finally here. I think the thing is we wanted to make sure that we got it right, that we got it entertaining. We wanted to be a bit that edge politically.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be doing this with you. So, Amanda,
yes,
tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what got you involved in politics.
Oh, well, there's so many. How long have we got?
Well, we've got as long as you like.
Okay, well, if you fall asleep, then I will stop. So I've always had a fascination with politics. I can remember, well, I can't remember, but actually a story that my nan used to tell me was when she was a little girl and her father crossed the picket line. And it just gave me a real fascinating insight, and that was in the general strike, into what it must have been like going back politically, even in those days. And it was really quite horrifying for the family because he was crossing the picket line to feed the family, but then he would come and take it out on the family. And he was actually really quite cruel to my nan, to a brother, etc. So thinking about that impact that you can have politically, I just was intrigued about, about all the politics that sit behind everyday life. What about yourself?
So I think my fascination comes particularly from my mum and my dad and my grandparents, I suppose, and my upbringing. So I was born in the middle of John Major's term in office, but I grew up predominantly during the era of Blair and Brown. When I was at school, my dad spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan with the British Army. And there was a particular scandal at one point about soldiers not having the right type of body armour. And I thought, well, that's bloody unacceptable. So who's in charge? So I was like, oh, wait, it's Gordon Brown. He's the Prime Minister. Okay. What political party is he a party of? Oh, right. Oh, the Labour Party. Oh, well, they're talking about socialism and collectivism. Everyone's the same and you're all going to be treated equally. And I thought, that doesn't sound great. Well, who's this guy that I see on the news all the time called David Cameron? Right, well, he's a Conservative. Well, he seems quite sensible. Oh, he's talking about, individual liberty and opportunity and aspiration. And I thought, that all sounded absolutely fantastic, really compelling, and what drove me to, at the age of 16, eventually join the Conservative Party and basically become a councillor and then a general election candidate with yourself in 2024.
Absolutely fantastic, definitely. And I think it's really important that we have an interest in politics as well. And certainly I remember from, a young age, really finding it quite fascinating. We did have, you reminded me about my other nan, who was 97 when she died. And I found this letter well, I've still got it actually, from Tony Blair.
Oh, wow.
But I never could figure out why she'd written to Tony Blair. It was just really random, and I'd love to, if you're listening, Nan, send me a sign. But I would love to know what it was. But how fascinating that politics really does play on everybody's life throughout the whole life. And for me, that's what makes me Conservative. Yeah. I think it's about that cradle to the grave. It's about how we enable people to really get on in life and be as successful as they want to. And that's what's frustrating me at the moment, all the things that are stopping people from doing that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think something that's really topical at the moment is, in particular, that people don't seem to be able to sort of influence politics, or the things don't seem to be getting much better at the moment. So I know that something that's in the news quite regularly at the moment is a lot of crime. Yeah. In particular, I would maybe call it low-level crime. So we're talking about, break-ins, muggings, shoplifting, all that sort of stuff. And it feels like, maybe even 5, 10, 15 years ago, particularly under the last Conservative government, that didn't seem to be getting tolerated, but it all seems to be on the rise. And I know that you were a victim of such incident not too long ago.
Well, I'll tell you very quickly about that, but I do have a few broader things I'd like to say on it. However, so I was a victim of having my phone taken out of my hand.
And where was this?
So I was in Westminster, and I was walking back over the bridge from Westminster to home. And I'm going to make a confession that I don't make readily. I was actually doing Pokemon. So I was walking along, and it was so stupid, Jamie, because I could see these 3 guys on bikes, and they were just checking me out. But there was this Pokemon that I just obviously hadn't seen for a while or wanted to catch. And just very, very foolishly, they just literally came along and just took it out of my hand, and they were gone, and there was nothing I could do about it. And I wasn't the only one. I know quite a few of my colleagues who had their phone taken out the hand, and the problem is that these people, they do it on purpose. They were checking me out, and then they went off with my phone. But I do think one of the things that, thinking about crime, and it's something that really concerns me, is how people get into crime.
Yeah.
And this is where opportunity is just so important.
Absolutely.
Because if you have the opportunity, you don't need to get, not I'm making excuses to get into crime. One of the worst things I've ever seen, though, was when I went into a women's prison. I was on the Joint Committee for Human Rights, and I was doing a report, an inquiry into self-inflicted deaths in prisons. And I went to lots and lots of different prisons, but the one I remember the most was a women's prison. And a lot of these women were in prison for crimes that they were forced to commit just because they had either handlers or people who'd groomed them. And it just seems so wrong.
Yeah.
It really, really does. And we need to do, and we're doing, something about that as a society when you think about the Vorg strategy and all of those other strategies.
Oh, fantastic. So I suppose, well, what if you were Keir Starmer, which I know might be maybe an awful idea to have. Right. How would you? What would you be implementing to fix?
Well, you tell me. I've done a lot of talking. Right. So what would you do first, Jamie? And then...
Well, so I think I'm very much a believer in broken windows theory, which is the idea that you have to come down quite hard and quite firmly on the petty crime to sort of deal with crime generally. So I think that absolutely we need to get more police officers on the beat. We need to get, it feels a little bit like the police are being used as a tool to sort of, I suppose, kind of police the digital world. You know, we see it in the news all the time of the police going on, knocking on someone's door for a tweet they've put, or for a post they put on Facebook, or something they may have liked that someone in one of the offices might have deemed inappropriate. You know, I actually think that, you know what, that's not brilliant. We want actually the police officers to be out on the beat, stopping crime, investigating crime. I know that there are obviously special task force now set up within the Metropolitan Police to deal with those the kind of gentleman that unfortunately mugged you and took your phone while you were playing Pokemon. But specifically to tackle that sort of quite aggressive crime.
Well, I think for me, it's a bit like in so many things. We have so much administration. We have so many things to fill out. I really do think that we can do this job with far too much.
Yeah.
And I think I'm like you. I want to see more police on the streets, but I think a way of doing that is actually by reducing the amount of administration. It's got really prohibitive.
Yeah, and I think actually a way of dealing that and a way of actually helping support the police will be the advent of AI. Because I actually think that all the new AI systems that are starting to be created at the moment will mean that a lot of that administrative burden that they're currently undergoing at the moment, AI can do it for them. Because actually, if we look at just sort of the transformations we're seeing at the moment, you know, AI systems are being brought in to do a lot of administrative tasks at the moment. And I think actually, you know, we're probably on the cusp of quite a significant.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, I love AI. You know, I love all things like that. And just coming back as well, though, to crime, I think it's really important that we educate young people not to do it as well. So we make it so you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, you're not being groomed to do it. But also, I think from an education point of view, realising that it's wrong, because it is wrong. We've just had an example today, actually, of the cricket club. I think it happened last night. One of our local cricket clubs. In
Alice Street in Derby.
In Alice Street, absolutely. And it was absolutely devastated.
Yeah, it was trashed.
It was trashed. It was, and I looked at the photos, and it looked purposely trashed. It looked like somebody had gone out of their way to do everything that they could possibly do, and that's wrong. It really is. And that's why one of the things I do also like is restorative justice. Now I'd love to say to these people, why have you done this? Why? What joy did you get out of not just really causing the trauma for the people who are running it? And bear in mind, they're mostly all volunteers.
Absolutely.
But also the people who go there for enjoyment as well. Why would you do it?
I know, it's just, and it breaks my heart for the volunteers that had to go and find that. And I'm absolutely the same with you as you, Amanda. Restorative justice, I think that's the way forward, because these people have to be held accountable.
They just don't know what it is they're doing, you know. I don't think they realise. Well, I don't know. Do they know what it is they're doing? It really is wrong. We had a situation where actually we did do restorative justice in the office when someone was doing some really quite hateful social media to us, threatening lives, that kind of thing. And the person it didn't occur to them.
Yeah.
They were just a keyboard warrior. Hadn't occurred to them that the impact that they were not myself really, but my staff as well. Yeah. It was just appalling.
So Amanda,
yes,
AI, artificial intelligence is going to revolutionise. I think probably in the next. It could be in the next 5 years. At the rate it's developing, is going to completely and utterly revolutionise all of our lives. The way we work, maybe the way we get medical care. I think it's going to be truly phenomenal.
Yeah.
But what do you think about AI? Because I know that you're really, really interested.
Well, I love
in
it.
AI.
I absolutely love it. And I think it's going to be about, like, we had the Industrial Revolution, we've had other revolutions. I think it's going to be the AI revolution. I think it's going to transform our lives. And I think we need to embrace it, not be afraid of it. And if you do think back, one of the things I do think back, I'm a real geek on the Industrial Revolution. And people were saying at the time, would factories take away the work that was being happening in people's houses, spinning jenny, all of that? And actually, people find other things to do. So I think what AI will do is do the things that we don't want to do to allow us to do the things that we do want to do. I think the other really fascinating thing is, as you know, I've got a granddaughter, is the start point, actually. So now her start point isn't me doing a calculator. When I did my A-level maths, it was a calculator. We weren't allowed to use calculators. I had to use these cosine books, which you'll have never heard of, and a slide rule. It was awful. It was awful. But I do remember going and doing a bit of coding, because computers were literally just coming out. Whereas now, 4 or 5 year olds are naturally picking up computers, naturally looking at phones. I think it's brilliant. I really do.
iPads, like the digital revolution is well and truly on, which actually could probably come at no better time, because as we're constantly seeing in the news at the moment, the economy is sluggish. That's partly and predominantly down to the economic decisions that the current Labour government have taken, particularly around national insurance, which appears to have ground at least the private sector economy almost to a halt. So, Amanda, if you were Rachel Reeves, but you would be our platinum blonde-haired extraordinaire chancellor.
Nothing against Rachel. Now that later. Sorry, just quickly. I just coincidentally recognised I've got the Ada Lovelace book, and genuinely, it's a coincidence. She was the founder of computer science. I don't know whether you've ever read the book.
I have not indeed.
She was absolutely fascinating. A woman way ahead of her time, but still. So if I don't actually want to say nothing against Rachel. I do not want to imagine being Rachel Reeves, but being the chancellor would be quite a challenge. And I do think, and we've said this before, just in conversation, you have to have a think about what it is you're doing. But you have choices to make. But you also have to think about those consequences.
Absolutely.
And it's just like everything has a knock-on effect, and you can't just be in the moment here and now. I think it's incumbent on anybody who has a position of power, which clearly you do as a Prime Minister, as a Chancellor, is you've got to look at the whole line of what you've got to look at. Thinking about computers, you've got to look at the whole system. Because if you don't do that, it's really short-sighted, and we will end up in a mess. And one of the things that people say is about Liz Truss, how short her prime ministerial role was, but in actual fact, and then they say the impact of some of those decisions. Now, I'm not sitting in any kind of judgment on those, but you think about decisions and how quickly they can have an impact. It's really incredible.
Because, and I think it's quite clear that her decision to increase national insurance has had a significant impact, not only on lowering the growth rates for the United Kingdom, not just for this year and next year and the year after, but also adding inflationary pressures back into the economy. So inflation, I think, is now up to almost, 3.5%, nearly 4% now. And people are feeling that when they go to the supermarket to buy groceries, when they go and, fill up their car at the petrol station. Her decisions are having real time and real life consequences to the people of this country.
Well, they are. And if you think about it, exactly that. I feel as though if we're not careful, we're going on a downward spiral. And it genuinely concerns me because what will happen is people will start to not be able to afford their food. Employers will not be able to take on people. There'll be no growth because they're just having to pay more salaries. And inevitably, what then will happen is houses become more costly, and it's this spiral that we need to really rein ourselves in on. Genuinely, really concerned about it.
Something that we've both wanted to do in this podcast is to sort of show our human side and maybe our humorous side. So at the end of every podcast, we're going to tell some little stories from our lives that may have a bit of comedy gold woven in there a little bit. So one of mine is my family were based in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, for a period of time. And I try and go out and visit as regularly as I could. And there was one particular time, there was a long beach called the Corniche, not too far from where my dad lived. And I'd go there most days. And there was one particular day, I'd been warned that the sea was full of jellyfish. So just be careful if I was going swimming. I said, okay, fine, fantastic. Anyway, I could hear all this horrendous high-pitched screaming. And a woman had gone swimming from Germany, she was, and she'd been quite badly stung. And no one was going in the water to help her. So I thought, well, good old Jamie to the rescue. It was like a scene from Baywatch as I ran to go and save this poor lady. Helped her get out of the water and then got a round of applause from all these tourists on the beach. It was all a bit bizarre. And then I went and sat back down and went back to my book. And all of a sudden, this Chinese lady came running over to me and sat on the end of my sun lounger with a selfie stick and a camera. And took a picture of me. And I was like, well, that's an interesting approach. So I sort of said hello to her. And she said, we love your films. And I said, well, last time I checked, I hadn't been in any films. I said, what films are these? And then she said, you're Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. And I'm looking at her a little bit perplexed. And I think she'd mistaken me for Elijah Wood, who was Frodo from the Lord of the Rings. And then before I know it, her entire family and her friends had just sort of swarmed me. So I had, 15 Chinese tourists all around me.
That is just brilliant.
taking pictures of me. And then one of them was taking pictures of my feet, which I thought was a bit bizarre. So yeah.
Oh, is that because you had hairy feet?
Well, apparently so.
I don't want to look, Jamie. Just keep them encased.
I didn't think they were as bad as a Hobbit, but clearly they thought otherwise.
Oh, you've made me think of so many stories. I mean, there's so many stories. And one of the things I do have to do, and not for today, is I've got to tell you about my dad and his adventures. He's 90 years old and he's got so many adventures that I could tell you. We could do a whole podcast on my dad. In fact, we probably should go and visit him and do our podcast.
Oh, yes, that'd be a great idea.
Because he has so much that he, when it comes to politics, he is really absolutely on it. And he really just reads the newspaper every day, even though he's 19 to Sudoku as well. But my story is the fact that, I'm going to tell you a story, first of all, about... I lived in Long Eaton. It's going back many years ago. Young family at the time, married at the time, and just sat there. Probably Saturday night. I'd got, I probably got my nightie on and my little slippers with fluff on, like I did back in the day. Which I don't know if I haven't still got them. And my husband was then sat over and he'd got a glass of wine and or pint of beer and smoking a cigar. And when I smoke Marlboro, I love my Marlboro. So I'd have been sat there in my negligee with my little fluffy slippers on, smoking my Marlboro, sipping my wine. Rob would have been over there having his pint of beer and, smoking a cigar, whatever. When all of a sudden the door burst open and all of these people ran into the front room. It just really totally bizarre. And the first thing, even though it was our home, is I was trying to hide my rooming cigarette. It's like, hide the Marlboro. I was thinking, what am I doing? Hide the wine, I mean, it was a Saturday night, for goodness sake. And then they ran upstairs and then went through the whole of the house and then came back down again. And what had happened is we'd had a new phone network. I think it was something like ATL or something. I can't remember, NTL. And it had triggered an emergency call out to the emergency services.
Oh my God!
And the reason they did that the way they did it is because if they'd have knocked on the door and answered the door, I'd have gone, and they could have held me at gunpoint had I been. I'm just thinking it was a crime thing. So instead, what they do is they literally charge for the door, going all through the house. But how random is that?
And that sounds like quite an intense Saturday night.
But it was just a look on our faces as we sat there with all these kind of people just running through the house, checking for people who were trying to shoot it. It was just really weird. But anyway.
Well, what a first episode, Amanda.
I have lots of stories that I can tell you, lots of stories.
Oh dear. Well, thank you very much for everybody who's watched our first episode of the Jamanda Podcast, and stay tuned for episode 2. Brilliant. Bye for now.